Hey everyone, Sebastian here for my week 2 discussion, formative versus summative assessment, knowing the difference in an example. The difference between the two for me is that formative assessment is an ongoing process. You're monitoring the student progress, so as the teacher, you're a lot more involved. You're more, on top of the assessment, as well as giving feedback throughout the assessment and directly after. You're just trying to, like I said, you're just trying to find out, progress of the student, where they lie in the material or the learning outcomes at that moment during that assessment. And then summative, like summary, it's at the end of the instruction. You're trying to see if they learned the outcome on their own. So obviously you're not going to intervene during a test or whatever your assessment is, and you're just going to sit back as the teacher and find the results and say, okay, cool, like this kid learned, or unfortunately this kid did not learn the material, and how do we move forward with that. Examples in my line with physical education, a formative example would be like practice drills. So I'm involved in the drill, I'm standing there with the students as they've, dribbling a basketball, and I'm there like, okay, hey, you want to be more in control, like bend your knees, spread your feet out, dribble with your hand on top of it, things like that. A summative assessment would be like a practical skills demonstration, where now I'm just observing, I'm not really involved in the drill, and it's something that they're being graded on, that I am, hey, like, do you know can you perform the drill? Push-ups, pull-ups, running, jump shots, overhand serves in volleyball, whatever. The issues that you would find in reliability in an assessment in a classroom would be like being inconsistent or scoring different, being for every student or from like class to class. Keeping it with PE, like that would be like if practice drills were different from student to student, or just so vague and so open that, no one's getting anything done. If I was standing there, or a summative assessment, there's no reliability. If I'm sitting there saying, hey, you got 30 seconds, dribble however you want, show me how you can dribble, and then I'm going to grade you at the end. And every kid does something different, and every kid does something that they're comfortable with. And there's no reliability. Like, you can't sit there and say every single student did the same thing. Hey, you guys got 5 moves, let's see how you do. If you're in control and how fast you do it, you get scored points based on, how quickly you do the move and how in control you are. All right, hey, you didn't do so great on this speed or on this control, everything else was really good, so you got an 8 out of 10. Every single student does that. That's a reliable test. Validity, how valid is the test, is to me is like, is it associated with the skill? If you're, for same thing for practice drills, if I'm teaching, if the end of the practice, if the end of unit practical skills demonstration is jump shots, running laps in your practice skill would do nothing for you. It's not very valid of an assessment for me to sit back and say, that kid's solid, he's going to be good at shooting a jump shot. She's not going to be too good when they're running around dribbling in circles, but they're going to be assessed on a jump shot at the end of the unit. PE. And then bias, it said to, any bias that you've experienced. I've never experienced bias in the classroom while being assessed. Thankfully, a lot of my teachers, everything has been, reliable, valid assessments, but they're all like very standard, like, hey, here's a quiz here, there's a end of unit exam, stuff like that. It's never been anything like really out of the box kind of thinking. But, I've experienced bias in an assessment where I was on a college visit doing a football camp thing, and me and the kid next to me did the same drill, and I was actually the benefactor of the bias. I was bigger, faster, and stronger than the guy. And so when I went out there and did the drill, looking back at it, we did the drill exactly the same. But because I was bigger, faster, stronger, and it looked more fluid, more athletic, I got praise, while the other kid kind of like was being coached, like, hey man, you got to do this better, you got to do that better. While, basically looking at it for his speed, his strength, his athleticism, he did it just as well as I did. But because I was bigger, faster, stronger, it looked better. So the coach was like, okay, he's fine. I got to coach this kid up. And that kind of like, oh man, like, why are you coaching him up versus me? We did the same things. It's like, I should probably be listening to what he's saying. Thankfully I did. But bias in a PE setting, practice drills, dribbling, 30 seconds, show me what you got. Well, the first kid dribbles super fancy and in control and really fast, and double crossovers, behind the backs, whatever. And then the next kid comes out and he's in control and he's dribbling fast too, but it's kind of more simple stuff. And I give the first kid a better grade because it was fancy and harder dribble moves, even though they both performed fast and in control. That gets a better grade because he dribbles better. That would be a bias in the PE setting. I think that the assessments are obviously necessary, especially if you do it right. A reliable, valid, and non-biased assessment, especially, formative, to be able to make sure you know where current students stand in the material. And then, at the end, if you don't have a valid or reliable test for your summative assessment, then you're kind of losing the point of, being able to accurately grade somebody for their, end of the unit grade. And that's unfair to the student. So that's my take on the assessments. Thank you.